There was more violence in Israel today. Police say a Palestinian gunman shot and wounded 2 Israelis in Jerusalem. Meanwhile, Israeli forces conducted another raid in the occupied West Bank. Palestinian militants responded by opening fire. At least 6 Palestinians were wounded, according to local health officials. All of this comes as the Israeli government's proposed judicial reforms have stalled. Joining me now to discuss the situation on the ground and what happens next is Naftali Bennett. He was Israel's prime minister from June of 2021 to June of 2022. Prime Minister Bennett, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Great being here, Amna.
So those judicial reforms brought Israelis into the streets en masse, brought the country to a standstill. Prime Minister Netanyahu has hit pause, but he has not completely pulled the plan. Should he?
Well, in effect, he has. I can now openly declare that democracy in Israel has prevailed. It's clear. It'll take a while until everyone understands it, but I think what Israel got was a great gift for its 75th birthday. Democracy will prevail. You are right that explicitly the Prime Minister has not yet said what I think needs to be said, which is we will progress on the reforms only in agreement, and we won't unilaterally try and shove it down the other side.
This has led to increased tensions between the U.S. and Israel. We should know President Biden has said that Mr. Netanyahu cannot continue down this path. If Netanyahu continues to push, do you worry about the relationship between the U.S. and Israel?
I don't think Netanyahu will continue to push unilaterally. I think right now there's meaningful discussions going on at the Israeli president's leadership between the coalition and opposition. I think Netanyahu understands very well now that the only way forward is a big compromise.
I'd love to ask you about Americans' views on Israel, because there's been a dramatic shift that I'd love to put to you. There was a recent Gallup poll that showed Democrats, specifically in the U.S., are now more sympathetic to Palestinians by a 15-point margin, and that's a real reversal in just a matter of years. 7 years ago, sympathy was 30% greater for Israelis than for Palestinians. What do those numbers say to you?
Well, I think we need to do a better job of bringing the reality and the beautiful reality, but complex reality of Israel to American viewers. Israel is not about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's such a richer environment. We're a democracy, flawed, we're imperfect, but we try to do our very best to thrive and to do good for everyone in Israel, for the Jews, for the Arabs in Israel.
Critics will say, how is this a real democracy, though, when you have 5 million Palestinians who have no voting rights, no access to government? I mean, in a true democracy, wouldn't everyone have equal rights?
Well, they do. The Palestinians do have access to democracy. They belong to the PA, which has its own elections. They elect their own officials. And in Gaza, there's a full-fledged state, a Hamas state. We handed over all the land in Gaza to the Palestinians, pulled out all the Jews from there, all the army, and went back to the 67 lines and handed over. But
under occupation, on the West in the West Bank specifically, Palestinians do not have voting rights or access to government.
They do. They have voting rights for the Palestinian Authority and access to the government of the Palestinian Authority.
But they do live under military occupation of Israeli forces.
Only from a security standpoint, we have to defend ourselves. But barring that, they have full freedom. The huge majority of Palestinians are governed by the Palestinian Authority, vote for the Palestinian Authority, pay them taxes, are subject to their rules of law. I do admit that the PA is doing a fairly lousy job in governing, and, for example, they keep on postponing their elections.
I will say, people and critics who watch the mistreatment and the unequal treatment of Palestinian and Israeli citizens there. Some have written now that because Israel doesn't treat all of its citizens equally, that it does not have shared values with the U.S. And some argue Washington should begin conditioning military and economic aid on specific measures to end military rule over Palestinians. What's your reaction to that?
I think that would be a profound mistake. First of all, we do share common values. Israel is a full-fledged democracy. In Israel, we have about 2 million Arab citizens that they vote for the same Knesset that I vote for. Arabs enjoy full the full rights that any Jew enjoys within Israel.
Again, I'm not asking about Arabs
Right.
who are Israeli citizens.
And
I'm asking about the 5 million Palestinians
and they belong
who are
to
not Israeli
all right,
citizens.
so part of them belong to Gaza, and they have their own government and their own failed state, and part of them belong to the PA, and they have their own government and their own failed entity. Here's the problem. We keep on trying again and again to provide them all the freedoms, everything they need. We cannot make them succeed more than they want to.
We are speaking at a time of accelerating tensions and increased violence in Israel as well. And this, settlement expansions are something UN officials have pointed to repeatedly as fueling that violence, the eviction of Palestinian families, the demolitions of their homes. Would halting those settlement expansions help bring down the temperature? Well,
I want to be very clear. Israel does not evict anyone from his home unless they are illegally there, and then we evict Jews and Arabs alike across the board. So we get
illegal
criticism.
By whose determination, though? Because we have seen Palestinian families en masse evicted from properties they've occupied for generations.
We are a country of rule of law. We have a Supreme Court which is respected across the world, and that Supreme Court tells us you have to evict this because it's illegal, or you don't need to evict it because it's legal, regardless of whether it's Jews or Arabs.
Saudi Arabia, with whom Netanyahu has said he'd like to reach a peace deal, has been issuing multiple statements condemning Israeli actions in recent months. He's now calling it an occupation, rather Saudi is calling Israel an occupation government again. How can Israel improve relations with Saudi Arabia, with its Arab neighbors in general, if the settlements continue and if the violence escalates?
I think the Saudis look at the region and they view Israel as a potential partner to fend off the real big threat of the region, which is Iran.
But they've just begun to normalize relations with
That's
Iran.
correct, because they sense there's a degree of vacuum in the region and they're hedging. But if they see that Israel continues the correct policy that I enacted of fighting Iran back on its territory, as opposed to waiting for it to hit us in our homes, whether in Israel or any Arab country, I think that will garner more respect, and we'll be able to make progress with the Saudis.
Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett joining us tonight. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Amna.